Good evening. Welcome to the December 18th, 2017 Troy City Council meeting. We are pleased this evening to have Reverend Dr. Charles Sonquist from First United Methodist Church to lead us in the invocation. If you would please rise for that, and then remain standing for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Lord of all, we would ask that you would grant strength and guidance to these city leaders and to the community that follows them, that we might ever manage to have a vision that is filled with caring and acceptance, and that these leaders will see their way forward in paths of service that grants a larger life than otherwise we might expect. Grant this, we pray, in the name of the Master. Amen.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend. Thank you. The Troy City Council meeting is now called to order. The roll call, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Slater.
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham. Here. Councilmember Baker.
Here.
Councilmember Hamilton.
Here.
Councilmember Henderson.
Here.
Councilmember Hoderick. Here. Councilmember Pennington.
Here.
All present. First on the agenda are certificates of recognition and special presentations. C1, on behalf of the City of Troy Employees Casual for Cause program for the months of September and October 2017, Community Affairs Director Cindy Stewart will present a check. Good evening, Cindy.
Good evening, Mayor, City Council. It's my pleasure to introduce Jen Mercanti. She's the new Executive Director for On My Own, and a few of you met her when the fire department took on the On My Own clients and found out that they're pretty darn good at softball. So it is my pleasure. The employees raised $794 for September and October. They were very giving, and we want to present that to On My Own.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Say a few words.
Good evening.
Good evening. Thank you. Thanks to the generosity of your city employees, this donation will fund 2 months of independence and skill building classes for our members with developmental disabilities. So this gift truly makes a difference for our small but mighty nonprofit, and we are so grateful for your support.
Thank you so much. Thanks for what you do for the community, too. Thank you. C2 is a proclamation to celebrate the Alibi Restaurant, 90 years in business. We are going to postpone this item until further notice because they unexpectedly were called out of town today, so we will hopefully present this proclamation in January. There are no carryover items this evening, so we will move to public hearings. We have one public hearing. E1 is a conditional rezoning application, file number CRJPCR 2016-002, which is a proposed IHOP restaurant and retail with drive-through restaurant on the east side of Rochester, north of Big Beaver. I see 1033 Urban Crest and 3130 Rochester and 3132 through 3142 Rochester are included. So I will open that public hearing, and I see that Brent Savant is ready and willing to start the conversation. Good evening.
Good evening, Mayor Slater and City Council. Thank you for the introduction. The parcel that we're discussing to be rezoned is on the screen before you. It's 1033 Urban Crest, and it is 0.3889 acres in area. It's fairly small. And here you see the zoning map. Notice that it's zoned R1B, one family residential, and the applicant seeks to rezone it to GB, which is the orange color, so that he can develop the property. So I just want to make it clear, it's a little confusing that the only parcel we're going to rezone this evening potentially is 1033. And that's part of a larger parcel that you see on the screen. That's 2.145 acres in area. The parcel to be rezoned is here, again, 1033. And he needs that for parking for the rest of the project. Here you see the zoning map again. And this is the overall proposed project. It includes 2 buildings. The northern building is existing. That's a strip mall building that's been there for quite some time. It runs perpendicular to Rochester Road. It's fairly awkward design. What he proposes to do is cut the eastern portion of the building off and repurpose and reskin the building so that there's a IHOP restaurant on the front and a 4,000 square foot retail space on the back. And on the southern portion of the property where the Pita Pit sits, he's going to demolish that and put a Panda Express building with a drive-through. And the reason he needs to rezone the property, this property here, is for parking. It doesn't work without additional parking. So it's kind of a complicated way to get to where he needs to be, because he would have the right, if it was just the building to the north that we were discussing this evening, he would have the right to submit building permits and just do it administratively. But because there's also a drive-through that needs special use approval and a large parking demand, that's what triggered the rezoning. Here's a rendering of the overall project, showing the IHOP to the left and the Panda Express to the right, and a zoomed-in rendering of the IHOP in the retail building. Very nice rendering, adding a lot to that existing building. And then here's the Panda Express building. The applicant provided material samples for you this evening for both buildings. They were over there. Hopefully you had a chance to look at them and review them before the meeting. The applicant is providing 120 spaces on the site when 155 spaces are required by ordinance. So he requires a 35-space parking deviation. Now, deviations are very common in the city of Troy. The Planning Commission has the authority to grant deviations, and they do so quite frequently. Because this is a conditional rezoning, Planning Commission makes a recommendation, and ultimately City Council has to grant the deviation. But to justify the parking deviation, the applicant used the firm of Fleiss and Vandenbrink to prepare a parking study, and the city's traffic consultant, which is OHM, approved the methodology, approved the findings, and made a finding that parking is sufficient for the site. So the planning department and city staff support that finding, that there's enough parking on the site. So this is a conditional rezoning, and the applicant has provided conditions. The first is that if the IHOP is proposed to be a different use for that portion of the site, the applicant must provide a new parking study to prove that the parking is going to work. And also the site plan, which is all the setbacks and all the other information on the site plan. That's considered a condition of rezoning. So this property is classified in the master plan as Rochester Road. There's 3 guiding policies for this district. The first is that to enhance the image and identity through private investment and public and private partnerships. And I think you'd agree that the image of this property is going to be dramatically improved by the elimination of blighted buildings and repurposing and reskinning and really improving the aesthetics of the site. The second is to improve access management, and they're actually eliminating a curb cut on that site, so it's going to improve traffic for that site in terms of the number of curb cuts. And the third is to preserve adjacent residential character and encourage compatible developments, and they're providing walls and landscaping and other improvements to ensure that they're going to be good neighbors. So on the screen now are our standards for rezoning approval. I'm not going to read them all, but one of them is that the rezoning is consistent with the master plan. I just went over the 3 main policies, and we find that it is consistent, and so does the Planning Commission. So this evening, the applicant seeks rezoning of that site that I showed you, 1033 Urban Crest, from R1E to GB with conditions that I just went over. They seek a parking reduction of 35 spaces. They seek special use approval of the drive-through and preliminary site plan approval of the entire project. And the Planning Commission last considered this project on November 14th and recommended approval 6-1, and City Management recommends approval of this application. And I can answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, Brent. Any questions from Council? Councilman Baker?
Has there been opposition to this by any of the neighboring properties?
I would say that I'm trying to categorize fairly. There was a number of neighbors that came out that did not have application to the project per se. They had concerns about parking and potential spillover onto adjacent properties and streets. But again, we're confident with the findings of the traffic study that was provided.
Yes.
With regard to that traffic study, I saw it looks like there's actually ample parking, even with this reduction based on their projections of a typical IHOP usage and the Panda Express, right? I mean, that's fair to say, in your opinion?
Fair to say.
Looks like, I mean, it's very sufficient. We're not right up against the edge.
Yeah, one of the findings was that on the busiest day of the week, which is a Sunday, that there'd still be an excess at peak times of 12 parking spaces. I mean, is it possible on Mother's Day that there could be, could be pushing the limits? It could be, but just like with the church on Easter Sunday, and these blips happen.
Councilman Hamilton?
My only question is there any indication of what's to happen with the 4,000 square foot retail piece of that, or is that'll be up to whoever buys it? What range of things could we see there?
Well, it's approved for retail, so anything within that range, but the applicant, John Baker of Brand Growth Incorporated, is here this evening, so you could ask him if he's got a lead.
Okay.
Councilman Henderson?
Regarding spillover traffic on the streets, would it be satisfactory to the residents to have no parking at all on those streets, or is that not something that they would consider?
I believe there's limited parking on the Urban Crest today. I believe there's some parking on one of the sides of Urban Crest to the east of the entrance to the fire station. So there's limited parking spaces, and comments from residents who attended the public hearings was that their concern was that there was no additional guest parking in the residential development to the east, which is Rochester Commons, and there's no spaces on the street because residents from the development parked on the street. But there are very few opportunities now, and in terms of improving the situation, I really can't speak to that. I would defer to the traffic engineer or the DPW director. That's not my expertise.
Councilman Pennington?
Can you go back a couple slides just to show the parking lot? Yeah, that one there. So is Panda Express usually a drive-through? I mean, I don't eat Panda Express, but I mean, is that typically a drive-through restaurant?
Yes.
Okay. And so that's plenty of, I mean, it looks like 10 cars there, so that would not back up into that, where they pull in, where you think it would back up on the street is the only concern?
Yeah, the requirement is 10 spaces, and we believe that 10 spaces is adequate.
Okay. Thank you.
One of the comments that I heard regarding parking is that if somebody did show up to the business and all of the spaces were taken, that the person that is coming there would probably just leave, as opposed to parking on Urban Crest. And I think I can attest to that. I think if I showed up there and there were no parking spots, I would probably leave, and that would be probably detrimental to the business as opposed to the residents. And I would assume that they've taken that into consideration when they approved this.
Yes, the site can be accessed safely, and so traffic can maneuver about the site safely and efficiently, and can exit the site safely and efficiently. So it's not the parking situation is not a safety issue. It's an issue of if there's not enough parking. They've demonstrated there's really no place to park off-site. That doesn't involve significant walking. So we believe that if someone comes to the site and cannot find a parking space, they're going to exit the site and go look for breakfast somewhere else.
Any other questions for Brent? Councilman Hamilton, did you want to ask that question to the developer?
Which
No.
one? Oh,
We can bring him forward.
yeah, sure. Yeah.
Good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening.
Mr. Mayor, members of the City Council, thank you for your time tonight. My name is John Baker. I'm a principal in the ownership of the property. We bought it about 1.5 years ago. I'm also a principal in Brand Growth Inc., the applicant real estate development company that we own and have operated since 2001. Excuse me. And I'm also the IHOP franchisee for this part of the state of Michigan. We're the largest IHOP franchisee in the state. We also maintain exclusive development rights to about 2/3 of the state of Michigan. We've tried to come here into your community for many, many years and looking for sites. I remember maybe 10 years ago looking at a restaurant called The Wagon Wheel. I think it eventually became the Hooters, if I'm not mistaken. But we're so excited to be here. When we first saw this project and was presented to us about 2 years ago, I remember calling my partner and saying, this is too good to be true. What's missing here? because it's a great piece of real estate. It's in a premier corridor to your community. It's in a market area that obviously is robust, and especially when you look at the great work you guys have been able to do along Big Beaver. Why would this site sit the way it has for so long? We have opinions on that. One of them is that there's probably a financial component to why this thing just never really caught fire and never really got in the hands of a developer that could make it work. You probably know better than I, but would it be fair to say the site has probably sat for 30 years underdeveloped and underutilized? We think we're in a unique position tonight in the project we're bringing forward, and it has to do with the fact that we are real estate developers. We have a specialty in dealing in retail and restaurants. We have a strong resume in repurposing existing buildings, and particularly up here in Michigan, the way you construct buildings with cinder block and steel trusses and metal roofs, it's a lot different than in the West where everything's made out of wood and shakes a little bit and doesn't last as long. But the stuff you have up here they're great structures, they're great bones. That's the situation with the main retail building here. It's in great shape. So we have experience in redeveloping properties like this. We are the primary tenant, if you will, a mini anchor tenant for a small center like this, taking 55% or more of the actual primary retail section of the project. And the combination of that, owning that operation, the IHOP in this case, and being the developer, I think kind of cures what I think is probably a basis problem in the economics of the project to begin with, and thus could be a reason why it's sat underdeveloped and frankly vacant for so many years. The project that we've designed is, when we first looked at it, we were more interested in trying to adhere to some of the standards that you have along Big Beaver, the architectural and design standards. Some of the newer projects are beautiful that you have here in Troy. So we looked at Big Beaver for our architectural inspiration, if you will, and also utilized, obviously, the zoning ordinance and the overlays that you have for Rochester Road. The exhibit and the rendering give you a good understanding of the project. The materials board describes that we're building a quality project. We're using cultured limestone and teak and some materials that don't weather and will hold up over the long term, because we intend to be here for the long term, being the operator of the IHOP restaurant and the developer. Brent touched on the parking issue. I actually have nothing to add. Your questions were right on point with the findings that we had with the traffic engineer for the city, your outsourced engineer, OHM, and our engineers. We came to the same conclusion, and it's important to understand there were two parking studies that were performed for this project. There was a reason why, and there was some miscommunication perhaps between the engineers, but two parking studies were conducted, both of them prescribed by the city's engineer. Both of them rendered the same conclusion. There's ample parking and overflow parking or excess parking even at peak. So you're correct. We are comfortable with the findings, and we do have everything vested in making sure those findings are accurate, because it will hurt our business if we were to mess that up somehow. Mr. Hamilton, if I may, your question about tenancy on the remaining 4,000 feet. There's well, I don't want to get too technical, but that remainder space there to the, I guess that would be to the east, we think is going to likely lease to a retail service provider, something like a real estate office, possibly and again, I don't know if this is allowed by zoning, but possibly a dental office, something like that. It's not likely to be primary impulse retail. It's probably more service provider retail. But to answer your question specifically, we've not had any dialogue yet. We've had to get through this process before we put it on the market, and we haven't done anything on the marketability of that space yet. So that's the best guidance I can give you on what we think might happen back there. With that, ladies and gentlemen, I have nothing more to add, but available for any questions that you might have or comments.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments. Any questions? Councilman Hamilton.
Who's the franchisee for the Panda Express?
Panda is actually a corporate entity.
Okay.
Yeah, and I believe all of their stores are still corporate run. I don't know if they have franchisees, but in this case, it's the corporation that we're working with.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Thank you. I appreciate your comments, and I appreciate you bringing this to our community. I think it's going to really help that area, which needs a boost. And from looking at the plans, I think it's a great asset for our city. I thank you for bringing that to our city. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. I don't see that anyone has signed up to speak on this item this evening, but if there's anyone in the audience that wishes to speak, please come forward. Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and return it to the table for resolution. Councilman Baker.
I'd like to move E1, conditional rezoning application, file number JPCR 2016-002, proposed IHOP restaurant and retail with drive-through restaurant, east side of Rochester, north of Big Beaver, 1033 Urban Crest, 3130 Rochester, 3132 to 3142 Rochester, Section 23, from R1E, One Family Residential District, to GB, General Business District, as printed.
Support.
Moved by Councilman Baker and supported by Mayor Pro Tem Abraham that we approve E1 as printed and read into the record this evening. Any further discussion? Councilman Baker.
Just want to kind of echo what you just said about that area. I think we hear a lot about the PETA property and what's happening with that, and this is definitely a beautiful looking project that will really be a nice enhancement to that corner and that part of the city. So thank you for bringing this to our attention. I think it's going to be a beautiful project and very successful from what I hear. We get asked about IHOP more than you could imagine. So
I think Mr. Salvanon told me that he's gotten more requests about when is this going to open than any other project in the city of Troy. Can you believe that? Councilman Henderson.
I'll echo that as well. I pay attention to social media quite a bit, and after this was approved through the Planning Commission, there was a lot of buzz in the neighborhoods about, the excitement of having IHOP. So welcome if we move that direction.
Go ahead.
So what would be the timing of it opening? Is it too late to ask that question?
No, not at all. I think we're in one of the many steps that needs to happen. Once we approve the rezoning, it would go back to the Planning Commission or to the city, or are we ready to go? Brent, can you speak to that? We'll allow this. We don't normally allow this.
Just begs the question.
Well, specific to the IHOP, as I indicated earlier, this is a rescanning and repurposing of a building, so they can seek building permits on that tomorrow. So he could begin work on that quickly, and I think I called it the PETA pit earlier. It's Mr. PETA. I misspoke. But he could certainly submit demolition permits for that building tomorrow if he wanted as well. So this is conditional rezoning, and if you approve this, you will grant him preliminary site plan approval so he can move forward with demolition. He's going to have to do some engineering design before he starts construction, but for the standalone building that exists today, he could start on that tomorrow, theoretically.
Any other comments from council? Councilman Pennington?
It's interesting, the design of the new IHOP. Most of the IHOPs have the like the Woodward type facade. This is a much better looking design. And welcome to the community, and we are also big fans of IHOP. And it's interesting that it's big on Mother's Day. I've never heard that before, but thanks for sharing that, Brent.
I think we can thank staff and the Planning Commission for the design. There are standards that need to be met today, and I know our Planning Commission strongly recommends how a building looks in the city of Troy today, and we certainly appreciate all that the Planning Commission does too. The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Heck yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Motion passes. Congratulations. Thank you. Welcome to Troy. Thank you very much. Thank you. Next, public comment for items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. I will call on Padma Kupa, who wishes to speak on J4A, Troy resident. Good evening, Padma.
Good evening to Mayor Pro Tem Edna Abraham and all the council members, and of course, Mayor Slater, and our wonderful staff who spend so many nights, including Brent, late working with us. As a planning commissioner, I'm very excited because we sent IHOP back several times till we got what we wanted, because you really don't have an ordinance for ugly. And so we can't legislate or create laws to make it pretty, but I remember very clearly that they came back because Panda Express, we wanted them to have an improved facade on that to match the IHOP. But I'm here to speak about the Troy Historic Village and the study sessions, and I just wanted to say thank you very much for the time that you've spent and the energy that the city is spending on not only the study sessions, but also supporting the Troy Historic Village. As a board member of the Troy Historic Village, I think it's an invaluable resource to our community, and it's nice to see the Barnard House finally get to be used. I saw that house being moved. I saw the church being moved when my kids were young, and seeing how often we use the church building for so many programs. It'll be nice to have the Barnard House also available to us. So just wanted to say thank you and happy holidays, and have a good evening.
Happy holidays. Thank you, Padma. That concludes those that have signed up for public comment on items on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. Is there any comment from council or city administration regarding public comments? There are no postponed items this evening, so we will move to regular business. I-1, board and committee appointments. I have 4 appointments this evening. I would first like to appoint Kathleen Francosis to the Global Troy Advisory Committee for the term that expires 10/30/2020.
Support.
Moved by the chair and supported by Councilman Pennington that we appoint Kathleen Francosis to the Global Troy Advisory Committee for the term that expires 10/30/2020. Any further discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes. Thank you to Kathleen for volunteering to be on that important committee. Next, I would like to appoint to the Planning Commission Ali Apahinian, Karen Cruz, and Carlton Faison for the terms that expire 12/31/2020.
Support.
Moved by the chair and supported by Councilman Baker that we appoint Ali Apahinian, Karen Cruz, Carlton Faison to the Planning Commission for the terms that expire 12/31/2020. Further discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you to those members on Planning Commission that continue to volunteer their time to what I feel is probably the most important committee in the city. Thank you. There are no city council appointments, so we will move to I-2, which are board and committee nominations. There are no mayoral nominations or city council nominations this evening. Next on the agenda is I-3. There is no closed session request this evening. Thank you. I-4 is the audit presentation by Tom Darling, our Financial Services Director. Good evening, Tom. You look excited.
Yes, I am. This is
Your time of year?
this is my time of year, absolutely. So, let me grab some hardware here that I want to talk about real quick. Okay. So again, Mayor, City Council, thank you for the opportunity to go over the results of the audit and our June 30, 2017 comprehensive annual financial report. However, before I do, I'd like to mention some national awards that we won over the year for our financial reporting and our budgeting processes. So first, without further ado, I'd like to quickly talk about our Distinguished Budget Presentation Award. And this is for our 2017-18 budget that we're in right now. Basically, the award reflects the commitment of the City Council and staff in meeting the highest principles in governmental budgeting. It's judged on its ability to serve as basically a policy document, a financial plan, an operations guide, and a communications device. This represents the 17th consecutive year that we won this award. I'd like to recognize all department heads and staff, along with members of our city manager's office, including Beth Tasnik, Kelly Mulliner, and Stephanie Fletcher.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Next, I'd like to talk about our Certificate of Achievement for Excellence in Financial Reporting. And basically, this is the CAFR from last year. Basically, it demonstrates the constructive spirit for full disclosure, transparency, and the ability to clearly communicate our financial story. This represents the 20th consecutive year that we've won this national award, and I'd like to recognize members of our finance, specifically in our finance department, including our accounting manager, Lisa Burnham, Anita Halpern, Don Williams, Renee Hazen, Lori Thayer, Kelly Girols, Barb Losi, and Saja Fatima.
Congratulations on that, Tom.
And then finally, without further ado, I'd like to show you our popular annual financial report. What did I do with that? Here we go. And basically, this is condensed financial information that's taken out of the CAFR, only it's designed for more readability, if you will. In fact, it is judged on that. It's judged on its creativity, its presentation, its understandability, and reader appeal. This marks the 18th consecutive year that we've won this award, and we need to specifically recognize and thank Cindy Stewart, who spends hours of her time putting this together for us. So thank you, Cindy.
Congratulations, Tom.
Basically, I call this, the Triple Crown, of financial awards. So it doesn't get much better than that. In fact, I'll try and put that into perspective if I could real quick. There's 1,856 local communities in the state of Michigan. Of these, only 5 receive all 5 awards. 2 of them are counties, 1 is a community college, and 2 are cities. So some pretty rare air. So, and then finally, so why do we go the extra mile? Because we believe in doing government the best, right? It's these types of efforts that demonstrate our commitment to fiscal stewardship, transparency, and long-term financial planning that go a big way in maintaining our AAA bond rating. So we can't do this without the support of all of you there to help us do what we do here. So thank you and congratulations.
Thank you, Tom.
Okay. Ready to move on to the meat and potatoes of the next potential award winner? I know I am.
I can't wait, Tom.
All right. So without further ado, let's go into the 2017 Comprehensive Financial Report and see if I can actually work this thing. So real quick, this is a 174-page document. Just to give you a comparison, here's a Big 3 auto manufacturer who only puts out a 120-page document. Just saying. We're full of disclosure and transparency. It's segregated into 4 sections, including the first section starting on page 1, which is the introductory section. Basically, you'll find in there an executive summary that details the city's organizational structure and a narrative of the financial results based on a fund basis presentation, which is kind of how we budget and we manage city operations. It's a great place to start if you're just looking for kind of an overview of the city, or a great basis for an in-depth analysis if you want to dig a little deeper. The next section is the financial section, and that starts on page 17. Basically, there's 5 components in this section. We start with these governmental-wide financial statements. It's like a business report. It's full accrual. It's got all the capital assets, any of the long-term debt. Again, it's full accrual disclosure as the city as a whole, so it includes all of our funds and all types of structures that we do. The next section would be the fund level statements, and again, that's the level that we look at when we do budgeting and financial management. We have a section for the notes of the financial statements, and gives a little more detail of the components that are in the financial statements, such as cash, receivables, capital assets, long-term debt. It gives a lot more detail of those types of components. Next is the RSI, which is the required supplementary information. And really, this talks about in-depth analysis of our pension systems, our retiree health care, and our volunteer fire incentive programs. And then finally, we have combining statements for some of our smaller, non-major type funds that we consolidate together. The next section is the statistical section, and that's a great section to look at. There's a wealth of information in there, a lot of 10-year trend analysis information that you can kind of find and evaluate where we've been through the last 10 years. The final section, which somebody in here is their favorite section, is our internal control and compliance section. So that includes the independent auditor's report and internal control and compliance, which is a great segue into an introduction to our independent auditor, a representative there of Nate Bauderman. Nate is a principal with the Raymond Group, who's happens that they're actually, I guess, national headquarters is right just right down the road. So Nate's a principal in charge of the Governmental Assurance Group and was the principal in charge of our engagement. So with no further ado, Mr. Bauderman.
Good evening.
Good evening. Well, I will try to be brief. I did want to congratulate, I have the first opportunity I've had in front of you to congratulate Tom on his Certified Public Finance Officer's certification that he received this year. That's very unique. There's actually only know a few in the state of Michigan, and it's very distinguished. There's a lot of work that goes into that, and I wanted to congratulate Tom on that. In terms of our report this year, as Tom said, kind of the last section of that report is ours on internal controls. You know, there's actually two parts of what we're doing in the financial statement audit. Our primary purpose is to provide you an opinion on the financial statements. We issued an unmodified opinion, which is considered to be a clean opinion. That's what you're looking for. And there's all kind of verbiage in there, but basically it means that the financial statements are fairly presented in all material respects. And in layman's terms, I like to say you can rely on the information that's in here. As part of our audit then, we also look at internal controls, not to give an opinion on the controls, but to plan our procedures to give you that opinion. We didn't have any material weaknesses or significant deficiencies this year, so no findings, and it's a clean report. I would also point out this year you also early implemented a new standard that was complex. A few years ago, you remember, you implemented the standards on pensions. This year you're required to do for the plan, implement for the other post-employment benefits or your retiree health care, but also Tom also chose to early implement for the statements themselves as well on your side. So it's taking those extra steps. It's what the city, I think you have done over time, and what you did once again this year.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nate. Any questions for Nate? Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good news.
Thank you, Nate.
Okay, so let's move forward and talk about the governmental-wide financial statements. Again, the focus on these statements is the government as a whole. Again, it's full accrual. It's as a business would report their financial statements. The focus is on the economic condition. In other words, what is my economic capacity to provide services? It should be noted that net position is not necessarily spendable resources, but again, indicates the long-term aspects of some of our short-term financing decisions. So that was a mouthful, right? If you think that's good, look at this chart. So I'm trying to put together, right, and make sense of, we implemented the pension, right, back in 2014, where it says restated. So what did that do to our net position? Well, that really increased it, right? Not many communities can say that. In fact, it increased our net position by about $25 million back in 2014. But again, when you get one shoe, right, the other shoe's going to drop, right? And so we, again, on what I thought was important to early implement, even though we didn't have to, I think we're probably one of the first in the state, if not the nation, to implement GASB 75, which is recognizing the OPEB or retiree health care liabilities. And anytime we implement, we always restate the prior year, because you don't want to see the revenue and expense come through the current year. You restate. So that's what I'm trying to show, is that the effects of these two significant pronouncements and what they had on our on our net position as a whole, but really, if you take that into consideration, you know what I mean, everything's pretty level, if that makes sense. In other words, from the operations standpoint. So if I'm looking at 2017, and we got $404 million of economic capacity, if you will, it's still increased from the restated 2016 amount of $391 million, right? What's that tell me? That tells me that I'm reinvesting back into our city, back into our roads and our infrastructure, that we're not spending our stuff just to provide current services. Okay? So let's break apart that $404 million just a little bit, because again, like I said, the biggest component isn't necessarily spendable, right? In fact, the largest part of our net position is our capital assets at about $332 million, and really represents about 82% of our total net position. So this still indicates an increase of about $10.2 million, which is significant, again, showing the investment in our streets and buildings. Even our unrestricted went up by about $2.8 million, so even my more spendable or more liquid assets went up too. So pretty good year as far as, again, the stability of the city. Again, without getting too far, you can still see the impacts, if you look at the unrestricted, how it went up between 13 and 14, and the effects of recognizing our pension assets, and then between 15 and 16 restated, recognizing the retiree health care liability. Again, those bumps, that's why you had those variances there. But again, all in all, I think we're pretty good. In fact, I would go as far to say there may be some communities out there, when they recognize their total pension assets or liabilities and retiree health care liabilities, they'll be lucky to be north of zero. That's speculation. That's just me. All right, next. So let's talk about governmental activities. Again, we're still at this governmental-wide or entity-wide level, but in there's business-type activities, such as our sewer funds and our water funds, where it's designed that I'm doing user charges to pay for the total amount of the service, right? But governmental activities are different, right? They're not designed to pay for to generate their own revenues to pay for the entire service, i.e. that's why we have taxes and things to pay for those voids. And so that's what I'm trying to show here is really from our governmental activities, the things that we do. What do we provide? We provide public safety. We provide public works and sanitation. And as you can see, the expenditures are well in excess of the revenues that these programs can generate on their own. So this graph is really trying to show what are our property taxes used for, right? And it's certainly the most significant one on there is public safety. And you can see that public safety is about $29.4 million. Yes, we have service charges out there where they're able to generate about $5 million on their own from the services they provide, but that delta, that change, about $24 million, has to come from somewhere. And so that's what we're trying to show here. Here's the cost of services we provide in the shortfall from the charges that they can generate on their own. Okay, so let's get out of the governmental-wide world and go back into the fund financial statements. And it's this focus on the near-time inflows and outflows, fund balance that we look at. Revenues are recognized when they're earned and available, right? And it's really the basis that we use for budgeting and our financial management decisions kind of on a day-to-day basis. So we're going to focus specifically right now on the general fund, because that is our chief operating fund. And as you can see, the general fund generated revenues of $54 million and on a budget of $52.3 million. So we're a little bit north of budget, which is good, by about $1.7 million. Well, this is primarily due to reimbursements that we received from the state of Michigan to tune about $1.2 million, where they reimbursed us our exempt manufacturing personal property taxes. You remember legislation a few years ago where they took that from our tax base, and they promised, I'll pay you back when I get my excise taxes and the battery credits were going to lapse. And well, so far, so good. I didn't budget it in 2017. I'll believe it right when I see it, because again, we have a conservative approach, right? Especially when it comes to revenues. Okay, so, but it did come in, and so that's why we're a little bit north of on budget on the revenue side. Let's go ahead and break down revenues by where they come from, by their components. By far, our biggest general fund revenue is property taxes at 54%, and that represents about $31 million. Next on there is about 15% comes from our intergovernmental funds, i.e. state and federal funds, including state shared revenues, and that's about $8.5 million. Another 15% comes from our charges for services, primarily, from rec center and the charges that we do for the service that we provide, and that's another about $8.6 million. So if you add those three together, that's about 84% of our general fund revenue stream. So I wanted to take that 84% and let's look at some trend analysis with it. I mean, it's kind of the same story. So remember in 2008, we lost some revenues through basically 2015. It kind of flattened out from 36 million in 2008 down to about 30 million, basically around 13 through 15. So we can see we're trying to make that slow climb back. We did have tax revenues of around 31 million for 2017. So that's a slight increase over 16 by about $500,000. If you look at the purple line, which again is those intergovernmental revenues, you can see we had about 8.5 million in 2017, up from about 6.9, and again it's those reimbursements for that exempt manufacturing personal property. Okay, let's take a look on the other side. General fund expenditures, budget to actual. Our actual is about 53.3 million in expenditures. Basically, we were under budget by about 5.2 million. So why was that? Well, again, when we budget for full employment, right? We don't play games. If we're full employed, we're not going to mess with attrition to try and, skew the numbers, I guess. We want to be full employed. Any surplus, though, and here's the thing, and I'm sure we're going to be hearing from the city manager before too long, is typically considered in the next budget cycle process, right? We use these surpluses a lot of times for one-time expenditures, and typically in capital, right? And a lot of things, that's what's funded our streets and our one-time expenditures. So that's kind of a prudent way, I think, way that the city manager presents that. Again, even though we were under budget, we were still up over last year by about 2.3 million, or about 4.6%, and that's primarily in the areas of normal wages, benefits, and some of our other service costs. Okay, let's break down expenditures into the categories by function. And again, our largest expenditure is in the area of public safety, which represents about 56% of the general fund expenditures, or about $29.8 million. The biggest part of that $29.8 million is clearly the police department, which is about 43% of total general fund expenditures and represents about $22.8 million. Now, I know we're talking about history here, right, because we're talking about what happened in our 2017 fiscal year, but I want to kind of put it in perspective. How does that relate, or how does general fund unassigned fund balance relate to our 2018 through 2020 three-year budget? And so I tried to plot that on here, and as you can see, we do have a plan to get back into our policy. Our policy is between 20 and 30% of general fund expenditures, which if I put that to dollars, it would be between 12 to 18 million. Our unassigned fund balance at the end of 2017 was 19.8 million. So, we're working our way there, and we do have a plan to get there. Not a bad struggle to have, right? All right, next is I'm going to talk about the Capital Projects Fund. If I can, okay, so Capital Projects Fund, which again we fund all of our major capital projects out of the fund, hence the name, right? Generated about 17.9 million in revenues. Now, of this 17.9 million in revenues, only 6.8 million are taxes. Okay, the rest really comes from grant, and even more specifically, transfers from other funds. In fact, about 8.5 million were transfers from other funds, including 4.7 million came from the general fund contributed, right, to capital projects from surpluses from prior years to fund street improvements, fire station number 4, and police perimeter fencing. So if we break out capital project expenditures by their categories, you can see that's overwhelming. We spend a lot of money on streets currently. As you can see, and that's of the 19.2 million expenditures, 64% is in street, or about $12 million. Let's look at capital projects fund balance. And, as we've been investing in these capital projects, it's got to come from somewhere. And as you can see, if you look at this, we kind of got a trend analysis, spending a little bit of fund balance in the capital projects fund. And again, we look at this every year during our budget, cycle. Yes, we got 9.7 million. We've had it higher, but when we look at the model that we have for the general fund, that we want to keep 20 to 30% in fund balance. It doesn't necessarily work for capital projects, right? That's not necessarily a good way to measure GROE in good or bad financial health when it comes specifically to this fund. Really, it comes to budgeting, right? And yes, we do have a 3-year budget, but when it comes to capital, we look out 6 years. And the idea is, can we generate and do we have enough dollars to do those capital projects that are coming due? It's probably no secret that the city of Troy is debt adverse, right? We have very little debt. We don't typically like issuing debt, right? So the idea is then to manage, right, this capital project fund for upcoming projects that we deem necessary. Again, what can I say more about streets, right? We've done it, and so maybe as we budget, we'll build this back up for the next round. So we'll see. But that all comes during the next budget process. Okay, let's turn the page to enterprise funds. Again, these are funds that are designed to pay for all the services based on the user charges that they have. For the water fund generated $20.7 million. In revenues, and I had expenditures of about 19 million. Wow, this is the first time since 2013 that I actually sold some water, so I'm personally very ecstatic about those numbers. So hopefully I can see it again, start seeing a trend. Again, so many years we trended down in the use and the volume. I mean, this is volume business, right, when it comes to that. And so to see that we actually had a nice increase for 2017 was good news. Revenues were up about 3.2 million due really, again, to the increase in our volume of sales. Let's look at net position. Again, total net position of the water fund was $100.2 million. Again, the largest portion is our investment in capital assets of $87.2 million. Again, the trend, if you look at it, again, the trend shows that we're continually investing back into our water system. We're not letting it depreciate down, basically use the economic activity just to provide current services. Okay, let's talk about the sewer fund. Again, the same thing. Now, it looks like a big spike from 12.7 to 13.5, and it looks big on this graph. It's a little skewed. It's an $800,000 increase. I'll take it. Again, it's all based on volume, right? Just as we've seen in the water fund. And it's first time in a while that we've been able to have a significant increase. Again, there was no increase in the rate. It's all volume driven. Let's look at the statement of net position. And again, the predominant aspect is the investment in capital assets. And as you can see from the trend, we are still investing into our sewer system. And yet we still have, we're pretty liquid in that system too with 29.7 million of unrestricted net assets for future services in capital development. Now I want to show you some really good, if you think that's good, wait till you see this. Sanctuary Lake, 2 years in a row, revenues over expenditures. Wow, outstanding. We've never done that. So Sanctuary Lake is one of those that we have to watch, because this is one that we have debt on. And so the idea is, can I generate operating revenue to cover non-operating expenditures, right? So again, first time, 2 years in a row, I actually have operating revenue, and how does that place against then our non-operating revenue? As you can see, we have non-operating revenue about $285,000, $274,000, somewhere in there, and that's really the interest on that long-term debt. And so the idea is, can I generate cash to try and offset that? Now again, as a lot of people will tell you, this used to be a landfill, right? And so there is a cash flow issue with it, but you have to compare that what's it cost for post-closure landfill costs too. So in that kind of light. Okay, finally, we're going to wrap up then with our trust funds and the percent funded and what our contributions were. The employee retirement system was 116.8% funded. Our contribution for 2017 was $659,000. It's zero for 2018-19. So that's good. Retired healthcare system was 56.5% funded. Our contribution to that was about $4.7 million. It should be noted, though, that prior to 2006, you couldn't pre-fund it. So since 2006, to get up to 56.5% funded shows a big commitment from the city to its employees. And then finally, the VFIP system, which is our Volunteer Fire Incentive Program, is 44.4% funded. Again, prior to 2016, we were saving it, but we couldn't invest like we could with the other retirement systems. We were subject to what they call PA-20, which restricted your investments to CDs, savings accounts, U.S. government securities and Michigan municipal securities, along with banker acceptance notes. But basically, you're not investing like you truly would a pension type system. So again, as you remember, we created the trust. Now we've got those assets in a more traditional type funding program. I'm not expecting that to go up accordingly through the next few years. Finally, in your financial statements is the statistical section. Again, a lot of 10-year information, a lot of great stuff to go through it, demographics and things like that. So with that being said, who has the first question?
Thank you, Tom. I don't know how anybody could have a question. That answered just about everything for me. I don't know. Questions from council? Councilman Pennington.
I just got one question. The retiree health care is 56% funded. Just curious, how does that compare to last year?
Well, it only gets the pension system, or the retiree health care, that only gets done every 2 years, okay? So when we had it done basically 3 years ago, it was actually 59% funded. You're saying, Tom, how can this happen? You do all that hard work, how can you lose 3 percentage points? And I can tell you, it's called actuarial assumptions. My actuarial assumptions is telling him that my health care costs are going to go up 9% a year versus what he used as an assumption in their last valuation. So that cost me a few. Also, a little thing called Cadillac tax is still out there from the Obamacare, and so they figured that cost me a few $100,000 with the assumption of the Cadillac tax. So to answer your question, I went down because of the increased cost assumptions that the actuary used, and that's okay. I'm not going to cry over 2 or 3 percentage points if again they're reasonable assumptions, because at the end of the day we have to pay for it. When it's all paid for, it's done, right?
Councilman Hamilton?
Yes, I was just curious, why did the water and sewer volume increase so much year-over-year?
You tell me. Whatever I do, I want to repeat it. Again, it's typically based on weather, right? Based on rain volume, based on heat indexes. Anything you want to add to that? But if I could repeat it, I would definitely do it.
Fair. And is the goal to get the retiree and volunteer firefighter to 100% funded?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely.
Great.
Okay. Regarding that Lansing's mandate, we would be at the top end of the requirements that were coming out of Lansing. Is that correct?
I do not see any oversight or additional reporting that would be required on us. Here's the thing, when I read the legislation, I guess Sorry, Brian. But I'm taking out of that, that's actually going to cost me some money, because if I read into it that I got to rotate actuaries every 5 years, that cost, you know what I mean? That costs money to bring this. I'm not saying it's not bad to have a second look every once in a while, but a lot of times it's like you're building it, right? You're building an engine to run, and so that may be interesting, I guess, that I see out of that. But as far as reporting, we're well ahead of the game. I don't see any oversight coming down from Lansing for the city of Troy.
All right, thank you. Any other questions? Councilwoman Hoderick?
I just want to come back to, you called it the Triple Crown. I call it the trifecta of financial awards, and it's a big deal. I just want to say, I recognize that's a big deal. Many congratulations to the entire staff and the work they do on budgeting, your team, your financial team that works with you, and frankly, the entire community that's come around to be engaged, the FIT team that's been involved, just the dialogue and the communication, and an ongoing drumbeat of how important this is to strive for all of these. You know, previous meeting I talked a lot about internal controls and how important they are, and that's not a new idea. While I was talking about it in a fresh perspective here, clearly all these years, year after year after year of the Triple Crown, it is something that we can be very proud of, and makes me confident about living here in the city and serving on this council. Appreciate that great work, and you know, personally want to stand ready to continue and to push hard, to be forward thinking and embrace the challenges that may come at us. We've been riding a high economy for a while, and I love the conservative practices that kind of leads to a question. We continue to be conservative. If we were to head into a downturn, how we can ride that out, I'd like to think that, like my own family, we have planned accordingly, and I think we have here in the city as well, and that continues to be true, correct?
I agree.
Okay.
Any other questions for Tom? Thank you, Tom.
Great.
Congratulations on the reports, and congratulations on your achievement.
Oh, thank you very much.
Next on the agenda is I-5, which is proposed amendments to the minor in possession ordinance. City Attorney Bloom, were you going to cover the introduction on this?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I will. This is brought to you because of changes that were made to the state legislation. There were two laws that amended the minor in possession laws at the state level, and because the state law expressly covers this, the city of Troy is preempted, so we must follow what their law is. And so these changes do mirror the new state law as revised, which is scheduled to go into effect January 1st. And we would recommend that you pass these ordinance revisions. And we did submit it to you as an informational item on the December 4th agenda meeting as well, and we've heard nothing so far.
Thank you. Thank you. I know there were some questions asked earlier this evening. Is council satisfied with those answers? Thank you. Thanks for all the hard work on this. I know we don't have any choice. This is the bottom line. Would somebody like to move that resolution? Councilman Henderson.
I'd like to move I-5, proposed amendments to minor in possession ordinance. I'll read it. Resolved that Troy City Council hereby adopts the amendments to Chapter 98 of the City of Troy Code of Ordinances, Sections 98.10.03, as recommended by City Administration. A copy of these amendments shall be attached to the original minutes of this meeting.
Support.
Moved by Councilman Henderson, supported by Councilman Hamilton, that we approve I-5, the proposed amendments to the minor in possession ordinance, as printed and read into the record this evening. Any further discussion? The vote, Ms. Dixon.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you again for your work on that ordinance. Next is the consent agenda. Anyone wish to pull a consent agenda item this evening? Councilman Henderson?
I'd like to move all items on the consent agenda as printed.
Support.
Moved by Councilman Henderson, supported by Councilman Baker, that we approve all items on the consent agenda as presented. Any discussion on those items? I see members of the Historical Museum and Society are here this evening. Thank you for coming. Thank you for the hard work that you do to make that a flower in our community. Thank you so much. The vote, Ms. Dixon?
Councilmember Henderson?
Yes.
Councilmember Hoderick?
Yes.
Councilmember Pennington?
Yes.
Mayor Slater?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham?
Yes.
Councilmember Baker?
Yes.
Councilmember Hamilton?
Yes.
Motion passes. If you were here on a consent agenda item this evening, they've all been approved. Thank you for coming. Next are memorandums and future council agenda items. K1A is an announcement for a public hearing which is scheduled for January 8th, 2018. It is a preliminary site plan review, file number SPJPLN 2017-0012, which is the proposed Davis site condominiums, which are on the north side of East Long Lake, east of Livernois, 285 East Long Lake, Section 10, currently zoned R1B, one family residential district. Next is public comment for items not on the agenda from Troy residents and businesses. I will call on Sam Raza, Troy resident, who wishes to speak this evening. Good evening.
Hello, everyone. It's just under 2 years ago when I was the next assistant in Brian's office, and just want to I really enjoyed listening to the presentations and hearing all of the great work that's been in the city. I keep up with the news, and something that, when I went back out east, I don't tell people I'm from Detroit. I tell them I'm from Troy, and I try to explain where I'm from and the ethos that we have here. So I just want to say thank you to the city staff and obviously the city council for keeping up that accountability and that professionalism that really makes people proud to be from here. And just another quick thing, I know there's been a lot of talk and discussion about the Civic Center project, and I just want to say, as a young person, as someone who has been here since 7th grade, I really see the need for it. And it was 2 years ago when we all had that really great retreat, and it was an exciting planning time, planning for it. Something that struck me was that all of my friends, even if they're went to Troy High or Athens, IA East, if they want to come back to Michigan or if they left, they always say Detroit or Royal Oak, other areas. And I think that hopefully, we'll see what happens. But I just want to say, as a young person, I know many other young people in this community want to see development there, want to see something with mixed use, with an actual downtown, because after 8th grade, Somerset wasn't cool. We want somewhere else to actually hang out and be. So I just want to put a brief plug in that. But I just want to say thank you to everyone, and it's great to see the good work being done.
Thank you. Thanks for coming back. Thanks for coming back and giving us some comments. Thank you. Appreciate it. Any response from council or city admin, City Manager Kishnick?
It's great to see Sime back here, and he was a great next assistant, one of the best we've had in our office, and I'd say that with everybody in the room. He was a great addition. The only challenge for me was he, as a Harvard student, he's obviously a lot smarter than me, so it was hard for me to keep up.
Well said. Thank you. There aren't any council referrals this evening, so we'll move to council comments. Any comments from council this evening? Councilman Pennington.
It is nice to see Siam back in Troy. When I was your age, I drove a semi for a year, and I traveled all around the country, and I used to tell people that I was from Detroit. I would not tell people that I was from Troy. But now that I'm on city council, I do exactly the opposite, just the way you say, because they say, when I say Troy, they say, oh, Detroit, you mean Detroit? And I said, no, Troy, and then, like you said, I explained. You know, your comments about the Civic Center, the downtown, this is also something that's been talked about since I was a young man in the city. This is a downtown has been talked about for 30 years that I know of, and I would hope that we could do something, but you know, I am not overly optimistic. But you know, I appreciate your comments and your foresight. It's been a contentious year in Troy, not just for the city council, but you know, the nation in general. It'd be a nice to turn the page for 2018, and hopefully we have a easier year ahead of us in the city of Troy and in the nation in general.
I hope so. Any other comments from council? Councilman Hamilton.
I just wanted to congratulate my brother, Joe Hamilton. His third son was born this morning at Troy Beaumont, Luke Hamilton. So I'm a uncle again for the third time, so I wanted to congratulate him and wish everyone happy holidays, Merry Christmas, and everything. And thanks for being so accommodating to me as I start my new job here for the city. Thank you, everyone on council.
Thank you. Councilman Henderson.
Echo that. Merry Christmas, happy holidays to everybody out there, and this is our last meeting. So looking forward to the new year and prosperous new year for everybody.
Mayor Pro Tem Abraham.
So I wanted to let the community know of an opportunity to support the library's endowment fund. The Troy Public Library has been chosen as the January charity at Sedona Tap House. So help support the Troy Public Library Endowment Fund during Sedona Tap House's January Steak Night Out for charity. So starting January 1st and continuing through all the Mondays in January during lunch or dinner, you can get an 8-ounce Black Angus flat iron steak for only $7, normally $18.99, so talk about a deal. And Sedona will donate $1 to help support the endowment fund. So just in the fine print, just make sure you know that it is a dine-in only opportunity, and you must purchase the beverage and only one steak per person. Please go out and help the Troy Public Library Endowment Fund reach its goal of $100,000 and enjoy a fantastic meal at Sedona Tap House. And wanted to wish everyone very happy holidays. It has been a tough year. Hopefully, with the holiday season, everyone can enjoy themselves, even those that may be suffering through some losses or hard times. Take a moment to reflect and enjoy the good things that are in your life. So, thank you.
Thank you. Councilwoman Hoderick.
I want to echo happy holidays, and for me, it's Merry Christmas. And I just wanted to comment that a number of us had an opportunity to attend an annual event that the Troy Chamber of Commerce puts on. It's an annual holiday luncheon with a panel of speakers that included small business owners in the area. And I just wanted to comment that it was such an optimistic, pragmatic, energized discussion that occurred. It was a really, really wonderful dialogue to hear, and it's just a peek in our community and at a corner of our community that not everybody has a chance to see all the time. And I wanted to share how much I appreciated the opportunity to be there, to represent council, and to hear from businesses, business owners, and just this overall dialogue, not only about Troy, but about there was a regional tone to it, which for me personally is a very optimistic tone to hear. And congratulations to the chamber and the chamber president, Ara Toposian, for once again, a really well-run event and a great dialogue. It sends us into the end of what was a tough year. I'm worn out. I am tired. Looking forward to a break. And I just want to again thank city administration, staff. We've been, as a council, asking for study sessions and information. And new guy here is asking question after question. And there's been a lot of really great work and communication. And I think we ended the year on a great note. And look forward to the new year working with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you. Councilman Baker?
It's hard to go toward the end of all these. I know you always go last, but Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everyone up here at the table and throughout Troy, and I wish everyone a Happy New Year. Councilman Hoder, I kind of spoke on some of the things I was thinking, but we definitely had an interesting year up here, and the community was very engaged and involved with some issues. Not all of it was positive and exciting, but I guess I do want to say I appreciate the community involvement, and I think it is a very healthy and good thing to have the citizens so engaged and so active. And I laughed a little bit because I thought, oh, you're looking for a break, right? We're looking to kind of have some downtime. But I look at our agenda coming up in January. We have lots of important things coming up and big issues. So I don't think we're going to get much of a break. But enjoy the holiday. That'll be it. But we are. I say it a lot, but I do love hearing from the citizens, hearing from you, hearing when you have concerns about something we voted on, something we're going to vote on. Please continue to email, call, and stay engaged, because it does make our jobs actually easier and more effective to represent you when we know what you're thinking and feeling. So happy holidays to everybody. Merry Christmas. Have a great new year. And also, I'm going to thank Kurt and his staff for clearing the snow as well as you did. I shouldn't have said that, because as soon as I do, someone will say, my street's not plowed. But it seemed like a very effective job, and I mean, it was the first big snowstorm we've had where I didn't get a bunch of emails saying, why isn't my street plowed yet? So good job, DPW, and thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, it is tough to go last sometimes, but comments that were very, very well said, and I think kind of bring everything into a conclusion. I thought it was a great year. I don't know what the little bumps in the road every once in a while. Hey, I wear a T-shirt almost every single day that says the glass is half full, and you know what? Anybody can do the easy stuff. This is a great team, and we're gonna have another great year. We'll have some bumps along the way, but this is a great team, and I know we can handle the tough stuff, that's for sure. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas to everyone. Next on the agenda is the reports. Anyone from council wish to comment on the reports this evening? Councilman Baker?
Just a quick mention of the report on the Troy Trails and Pathway update. I'm excited to see that there's been a lot of good community engagement with the resident team as well as the city staff, and I think that that's a great step in providing a plan or a next phase to present to us. I'm assuming sometime next year we'll have a better idea of what the next ideas are being brought to us, but it's a great report and very thorough, and it's nice to see so much overlap of what are called hotspots, what people thought were important to the city, what nodes to connect with the trails and pathways. So I'm excited about that and working to see how we can do that in a cost-effective and yet enjoyable way.
Well said. Councilman Henderson.
Understated are always the letters of appreciation. We get every agenda. I don't know if you look down in the P part of the agenda, but letters of appreciation come in from various people regarding a lot of things in the city, and What's glaring is there's always something in there for the police department and always something in there for the fire department. And I don't want to understate any of those letters because when you read them, they're all important and they have touched somebody's life. So my appreciation goes out to the police force and the fire department for all that they do, even though we don't probably recognize the letters of appreciation as often as we should. So thank you.
Thank you. Well said. Any other comments on the reports? I don't see that anyone has signed up for comments on the items on or not on the agenda from members of the public outside of Troy. There is no closed session this evening, so thank you for coming tonight. Once again, happy holidays, Merry Christmas. We'll see you next year.